October 1962. The world didn't know it yet, but humanity was standing just one mistake away from nuclear war. In the United States, families were watching television. Children were playing in schoolyards. Soldiers were going about their daily routines. Life felt normal. But behind closed doors in Washington, military leaders were studying photographs that revealed something terrifying. Just 90 miles from the American coast, the Soviet Union had secretly placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, weapons powerful enough to wipe out entire cities within minutes. New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago. Millions of lives suddenly hung in the balance. The Cold War had been tense for years, but this moment was different. Now the two most powerful nations on Earth, the United States and the Soviet Union, were facing each other in a confrontation that could destroy the world. For 13 days, leaders on both sides made decisions that could either save humanity or end it. This is the story of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the moment when the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before. And if you enjoy powerful stories from history, stories that shape the world we live in today, make sure you subscribe to UNHEARD, because this channel dives deep into the moments history almost forgot. Now, let's go back to the moment it all began. On October 14, 1962, an American U-2 spy plane flew high above the island of Cuba. At 70,000 feet in the air, its powerful cameras captured photographs of something unusual hidden among the Cuban countryside. Long launch platforms, large missile transport trucks, construction sites protected by Soviet troops. When the photographs were brought back to Washington and analyzed by intelligence experts, the conclusion was chilling. The Soviet Union was secretly installing nuclear missile bases in Cuba. These weren't ordinary weapons. These were medium-range ballistic missiles, capable of delivering nuclear warheads directly to the United States. From Cuba, they could reach major American cities in just minutes. The photos were rushed to the White House. When President John F. Kennedy saw them, he immediately understood the danger. The Soviet Union had placed nuclear weapons within striking distance of the United States, and if those missiles became operational, the balance of power in the Cold War would change overnight. But Kennedy also knew something else. If America responded too aggressively, it could trigger a global nuclear war. So he called an emergency meeting with his closest advisors. The group that gathered in the White House would later be known as ExComm, the Executive Committee of the National Security Council. Inside that room, the fate of the world would be debated. The atmosphere inside the White House was tense. Military generals argued that the United States should launch immediate airstrikes against the missile bases, destroy them before they were ready. Others warned that such an attack would almost certainly kill Soviet soldiers stationed in Cuba, and if Soviet troops died in an American attack, the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev might retaliate, not just in Cuba, but somewhere else, perhaps in Berlin, where Soviet and American forces were already facing each other across a divided city, or worse, with nuclear weapons. The generals insisted that waiting would only make the situation more dangerous. But Kennedy was cautious. He understood that once the first shot was fired, events could spiral out of control. Instead of attacking immediately, he decided on another strategy, a naval blockade. American warships would surround Cuba and stop Soviet ships from delivering more weapons. Kennedy called it a quarantine rather than a blockade, because technically, a blockade could be considered an act of war. But no matter what it was called, the message was clear. The United States was drawing a line, and the Soviet Union would soon have to decide whether to cross it. On October 22, 1962, President Kennedy addressed the American people on national television. Millions of Americans sat in their living rooms, watching as the president delivered a message that stunned the nation. He revealed the existence of the missile bases in Cuba, and he announced that the United States would enforce a naval quarantine around the island. Any Soviet ship carrying military equipment to Cuba would be stopped. The world immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. American military forces were placed on DEFCON 3, a high state of readiness. Strategic bombers armed with nuclear weapons were prepared for possible deployment. Across the country, people began to fear the worst. Families built fallout shelters in their backyards. Schools practiced nuclear attack drills. For the first time, many Americans seriously believed they might witness the end of the world. But the most dangerous moments of the crisis were still ahead. Soon, Soviet cargo ships began moving toward the American naval blockade around Cuba. On board those ships were supplies and possibly more military equipment. American warships waited anxiously. If the Soviet vessels refused to stop, the United States Navy had orders to intercept them. The world held its breath. Would the Soviet ships continue forward and force a confrontation, or would they turn back? At the last moment, several Soviet ships slowed down. Then they changed course. They turned away from the blockade. For a brief moment, it seemed like the crisis might be easing. But the missile bases in Cuba were still there, and they were getting closer to becoming operational. Meanwhile, tensions continued to rise. Behind the scenes, secret messages were being exchanged between Washington and Moscow. Both sides were searching for a way to avoid disaster. One of the most frightening moments of the entire crisis happened far below the surface of the ocean. Near Cuba, American naval forces detected a Soviet submarine. What the Americans didn't know was that the submarine was carrying a nuclear torpedo. American ships began dropping small practice depth charges to force the submarine to surface. Inside the submarine, the conditions were terrible. The crew had been underwater for days. The temperature inside the vessel was extremely high, and communication with Moscow had been lost. The captain of the submarine believed that war might have already started. He prepared to launch the nuclear torpedo. One launch and a nuclear explosion could have triggered a chain reaction leading to global war. But on board the submarine, the decision to fire the torpedo required approval from 3 senior officers. 2 of them agreed. The third officer hesitated. His name was Vasily Arkhipov. Arkhipov refused to approve the launch. He argued that they should surface and wait for orders instead. After a tense argument inside the submarine, the captain finally agreed. The torpedo was never launched. That single decision may have saved the world. While the world watched the confrontation unfold, a quieter battle was taking place behind the scenes. Messages were being sent between Washington and Moscow, some official, others secret. Each letter carried enormous weight because a single misunderstanding could push the world closer to nuclear war. Inside the Kremlin, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev faced his own dilemma. He had placed the missiles in Cuba for several reasons. First, to protect Cuba. Just a year earlier, the United States had supported an invasion attempt known as the Bay of Pigs. It had failed, but the Soviet Union feared another attempt to overthrow Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Second, the missiles were meant to shift the balance of power. The United States already had nuclear missiles stationed in Turkey, close to Soviet territory. From Khrushchev's perspective, placing missiles in Cuba was simply leveling the playing field. But now the plan had been discovered, and the world was on the edge of catastrophe. Khrushchev needed a way out, without appearing weak. On October 26th, President Kennedy received a long message from Khrushchev. The tone of the letter was emotional, almost desperate. In it, Khrushchev suggested a solution. The Soviet Union would remove its missiles from Cuba if the United States promised never to invade the island. It seemed like a possible way to end the crisis. But before Kennedy could respond, another message arrived the next day. This second letter was very different, much harsher. This time, Khrushchev demanded something more. The United States would have to remove its nuclear missiles from Turkey. Now the situation became even more complicated. If Kennedy publicly agreed to remove the missiles, it might make the United States appear weak to its allies. But rejecting the demand could mean the crisis would continue, possibly leading to war. Time was running out. October 27, 1962, would later be called Black Saturday. It was the most dangerous day of the entire crisis. That morning, an American U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba by a Soviet missile. The pilot, Major Rudolph Anderson, was killed. Inside the White House, military leaders demanded immediate retaliation. They argued that the United States had to respond with airstrikes. Otherwise, it would appear weak. But Kennedy hesitated. He believed the missile launch may have been ordered by a local commander, not by the Soviet leadership itself. If America attacked Cuba now, the situation could spiral completely out of control. Meanwhile, another dangerous incident was unfolding. An American U-2 aircraft accidentally drifted into Soviet airspace over Alaska. Soviet fighter jets scrambled to intercept it. American fighters armed with nuclear missiles took off to protect the spy plane. For several terrifying minutes, nuclear-armed aircraft from both sides were flying toward each other. One mistake, one nervous pilot, could have started a war that would destroy the planet. But somehow the planes turned away. The world had narrowly avoided disaster. Inside the White House, Kennedy and his advisors made a crucial decision. They would publicly accept the first Soviet proposal. The United States would promise not to invade Cuba. In exchange, the Soviet Union would remove the missiles. But there was also a second, secret agreement. Privately, the United States agreed to remove its nuclear missiles from Turkey. However, this part of the deal would remain hidden from the public, at least for many years. On October 28th, Khrushchev announced that the Soviet Union would dismantle the missile bases in Cuba and ship the weapons back to the Soviet Union. The crisis was finally over. After 13 days, the world stepped back from the edge of nuclear war. When the crisis ended, leaders on both sides realized just how close they had come to catastrophe. The United States and the Soviet Union began taking steps to reduce the risk of future conflict. One of the first changes was the creation of a direct communication line between Washington and Moscow. It became known as the hotline. This system allowed leaders from both countries to communicate instantly, reducing the risk of dangerous misunderstandings. The crisis also led to new agreements limiting nuclear weapons testing. Both sides understood that the world could not survive another confrontation like this one. Years later, historians would uncover many hidden details about the Cuban Missile Crisis. One of the most remarkable involved the Soviet submarine officer we mentioned earlier, Vasily Arkhipov, the man who refused to authorize the launch of a nuclear torpedo. At the time, very few people knew about his decision. But without his calm judgment, the Cuban Missile Crisis might have ended very differently. A nuclear explosion in the ocean could have triggered retaliation from the United States, and within hours, cities around the world might have been destroyed. Instead, one man chose restraint, and history took another path. The Cuban Missile Crisis remains one of the most dangerous moments in human history. For 13 days, the fate of the world rested in the hands of a few leaders. Their decisions, their patience, and sometimes their luck prevented a disaster that could have killed hundreds of millions of people. It was a reminder of how fragile peace can be, and how important careful leadership becomes in moments of crisis. Because history isn't just shaped by wars. Sometimes it's shaped by the wars that never happen. The Cuban Missile Crisis ended without nuclear war, but the memory of those 13 days still echoes through history. A moment when the world stood at the edge and somehow stepped back. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more untold moments from history, make sure you subscribe to UNHEARD, because some of the most powerful stories ever told are the ones history almost forgot. And trust me, there are many more waiting to be uncovered.